In this practice session, we're going to work through the whole abdomen. And in order to do this, what we're going to do is start from the surface and work back towards the spine. Now, as you're going for this, it's related, similar sensation to what we did with the solar plexus. But we want to get good at making this distinction between feeling deep into the center of the body or being on the surface. So here we're going to play with both. Let's settle in first, though, just by feeling through your whole system. No agenda to dissolve, no agenda to sink or make anything happen, and not even necessarily when you're settling in, going after a specific order of things. Just feel the body, see what's available to you, see what feels good, connected, see what feels maybe a little stuck or off. And just use this method of settling in to essentially start to bring the mind and the awareness more in tune and more in sync with the body and your energy, as opposed to setting out with a strong mind-driven directive and trying to force the body or your energy into that shape. It's like an easy settling in, kind of landing feel, where depending on what you're coming from or what you've been doing today, the mind might be all over the place, but you want it to sort of soak in. The mind sort of touches the energy, touches the body, and feels in what way it'll be able to most sort of fluidly and productively interface with it. Another way that we've talked about of settling in that really helps with this is going for something really tangible, like the weight in the feet. So adjusting yourself at the hips and the quad to drop the lower spine, balance the whole torso, and even slightly back and forth at the ankles or left, right in the feet until you feel like the weight of the body is centered in a very tangible, specific way over the centers of the arches. So going from the ground up, just making sure that everything, the way you're holding the body, sort of feeds into that root, feeds into that connection to the earth. From the ankles and feet, from the knees and the hips, and then up through the spine, and even feeling the way that the arms are hanging out from the spine, right? From between the shoulder blades, out through the shoulders, out through the chest, and letting the arms dangle and hang in a way that doesn't feel like it's tensing you up or collapsing you down. And complete that process up through the neck and up through the crown of the head. And at the crown, you sort of gather your awareness. You're preparing to dissolve, and the crown of the head throughout this process becomes the most familiar gate to return to trigger the whole dissolving process. So feeling the crown, And then coming down through the temples, the forehead, the gate of the third eye, and the eyes. So revisiting gates we've worked on quite a bit already. It's like going through the rooms of your house and turning on the lights, right? Make sure you're connected, open, and ready. And that's going to help strengthen the flow down through the new areas that we're going to try to get into in a couple minutes. Now the ears, the jaw, and the roof of the mouth. And then feel how the skull is sitting on top of the neck. Find the gate, the space between the occipital bone, the base of the skull, and the top of your spine. And from there, just work down height by height, piece by piece, trying to feel the spaces between the vertebrae of the neck, down through the throat as well, until you get to the base of the neck and the throat notch. One of the things that dissolving, sort of revisiting the gates every time you dissolve, gives you is that you start to kick off the process of finding the right way of contacting the gates. So the familiar ones, it's a lightness or a frequency that sort of resonates with the releasing of the energy at that gate. Once you dial into that, tune into that, you use the same kind of feeling awareness to open up the new spaces. And sometimes it takes adjustments in terms of that way you're contacting or the wavelength that's on or however you sort of relate to it. But for the most part, it's setting up a stream that you're in so that by the time you come down the body and get to the new areas, your body is sort of already in the act of letting go and letting things release. So this is building momentum towards the new areas that we work on each time. That's why it's worth going through them nice and slow, sort of as a warm-up and, to build momentum so that it gets easier the longer you do it. So now feeling into the shoulder gates, in front of the blade, the shoulder's nest, the tip of the shoulder, and even inside the armpits. And down through the elbows as well. Feeling all around the elbow joints, into the centers of the elbow joints. And remember, when we're working on the gates, specifically dissolving, the early stage of a lot of the dissolving will be that things start to release a little bit in a way that they would begin to sink down the body. And the sinking is good and it's fine and it's a healthy practice to do. But when you notice the sinking, in this case, you're not really going to follow that sinking feel. So something will begin to let go and release, and there's a sensation of it dropping down through the body, sort of releasing with gravity. To get to dissolving, like now as you come down to the wrists and the hands, instead of following the sink, you want to hold the mind at that area and continue to pay attention to the change in the state as it begins to release and let go. So dissolving is, in one sense, a sort of a refinement on the sinking. And I want to encourage you not to get distracted by the sinking, not to follow along with the sinking. Let it take you out of the area that will then continue to release in a way that's more like dissolving. So through every knuckle, through the spaces between the long bones of the hand, and out to the tips of the fingers. Now feeling back into the shoulder area between the blades, and let's come down through the rib cage. So whether it is easier for you to feel the joints at the front through the sternum, or the back near the spine, or especially when you're trying to feel the spaces between the ribs, feeling the sides of the body can be really helpful, really useful. And even though the structures are different, remember the way that you access the crown of the head or the eyes or any of the other gates in the upper body that are really strong and accessible to you. Try to use that same type of feeling awareness to access the spaces between the ribs or the joints between the ribs and the chest or the back. There's a tendency in other areas to try to feel into it in a different way, but you don't need to. Use the same kind of mind to do it. Now as you get down to the bottom of the rib cage and feel the solar plexus, we tried to get the solar plexus cavity to come online with the pelvis, the lower dantian, the crown of the head, as a structural support in the middle of the body. So it eliminates this feeling of kind of collapsing back into your spine and leaning back into the spinal column as a big structure, and puts you just a little bit ahead of it. And that activates some of the buoyant properties of the structure, of the skeletal structure, to give you just enough pung to hold the body up. It's a whole other topic. The gate for the solar plexus is best accessed through the surface of the body. So just feel just under your rib cage on the surface. Rest your mind in the solar plexus. And I want you to take the same kind of feeling that you got at the gate of the solar plexus, and now, at the level of the skin or just on either side of the skin, feel the whole surface of the abdomen, the whole belly. Our main practice today, the new piece we want to add today, is feeling that whole belly surface and dissolving little by little from the skin, the surface on the front, back towards the spine. And it's going to give us a feeling for all the internal organs. But what you're really going to develop here is the ability to stay on one layer at a time. So in other words, you don't want to feel deep inside the body right at the beginning. Find the surface layer with your mind as best you can. And we're talking about a 1/16 of an inch at a time, just a little bit. It's like the slow soaking in of a sponge. When the water starts to creep up a dry sponge, right? It's a little bit of saturation at a time to move inward in the body. So just, again, start from an outside light layer. And sometimes compared to bones and joints, when you feel into the organs, they can feel more watery or more dense, or it might feel a different sensation. They're very different structures. So the frequency you need to be at, the wavelength you need to be on to find what will dissolve them might be a little longer or slower. I don't know, I'm trying to give you a few different ways to kind of tap into the different quality or sensation of it. But avoid the temptation to kind of try to make something move or make something release. And as best you can, let the mind feel. You're doing a weird combination of seeing spontaneously what the mind can touch, sort of like walking into a completely dark room and feeling along the walls to try to get the shape of the room. You have a slight anticipation with the awareness, but you're also restraining yourself from running headlong into it or making up ideas about what's going to be in that room. You have to very gradually palpate your way through it. And that's the kind of patience you want to use when it comes to feeling an area like this in the body. Good, so now, whatever you can feel through the belly, just kind of let go. Let your awareness drop and start to have this sense of sinking into the bowl of the pelvis. So everything around the hips and the pelvis, the big muscles, let your mind start to sink. We're going to transition into the sinking process to clear the rest of the way down through the legs and the feet. But start by just letting it happen into the pelvis. And as you feel the muscles of the hips and the pelvis, let the weight of the pelvis begin to release into the legs. So just through the tops of the thighs, around front, back, and sides. And then down through the middles of the thighs. Again, you might tune into the big muscles, but it's that sense of warmth or heat or fluidity, wetness, like sinking is the saturation quality. Keeping the knees open as you feel the weight fall through the knee, so nothing gets stuck in the knee. And then down into the lower leg. Releasing the shins and the calves. And not making any big movements, but sort of coming into alignment so that all of this weight that you're dropping and releasing and flushing through your system is going as best you can through the structure of the foot, center of the arch, helping the feet spread open as you release the ankles, not getting stuck in the feet. Letting the soles soften as you spread through the feet. And release through the toes, through the heels, through the whole sole of the foot. Just doing one last pass from the crown of the head, nice and effortlessly, just scanning down, letting everything drop through you without collapsing, without holding. And at the end, just letting the inside of the body get as still as possible. Let the energy quiet. Just feel your inside settle. Not forcing it, dropping it, trying to make anything happen. It's just If everything was in motion, let it kind of come to rest on its own. And feeling that stillness inside you is a great way to then transition to whatever else you're going to do today. All right.